Welcome back to Nioh, my favorite game of 2017, but not the best one. Anyway, today as a Nioh veteran, I will do my best to give you some relevant tips that are designed to make your life a bit easier, if you're a beginner that is. Starting with the number 1. Don't get attached to the gear. As I've said it many times, Nioh is not a Dark Souls clone, and one of the main reasons to that is that it has Diablo-like gear progression system. So if you want to call it a clone, the more accurate name to throw would be Diablo. Anyway, yes, a lot of things and important mechanics in Nioh are tied to your equipment. All of those mechanics are fun and cool, allowing you to be flexible with how you want to play and whatnot. So it is kinda natural for some players to get attached to what they wear after a certain period of time. You know, you find a first set, it seems so cool and gives you a fancy bonus, but what happens 5 missions later? Is it still good? Maybe it is, but is it worth to wear it? In 99% of the cases, the answer is actually no. Nioh is designed to have your loot grow with you as you progress through the game, so chances are your gear will become obsolete just after an hour of playing, and by obsolete I mean suboptimal. With Nioh being super cool, gameplay driven masterpiece, you can obviously complete the game without using any kind of fancy armor and whatnot, but my point is that by being attached to a piece of gear, you are making your life a lot harder than it is necessary. In other words, if you are yet to hit the endgame, change your gear as often as possible. Disregard the rarity or 1% bonuses. None of that will likely matter if you can get something better as a reward for the next mission. While it's true that with the use of Blacksmith Waifu you can soul match your weapons and armor, effectively increasing its level, it is kinda redundant and it's super expensive, especially early on in the game. In similar vein, don't bother with reforging. The payout is not worth it till you hit the endgame. So what do I suggest to do with all the unnecessary gear? Well, you can sell it or break it down. But my advice is to just donate it to the shrine in exchange for some Amrita. In other words, make it count. Tip number 2. Don't try to rush through the game. This is very important. As I've said earlier, Nioh has Diablo-like gear progression system, so some players decide to rush through the story mode to get better gear and become unstoppable. That's not really how it works. To rush through the game, you have to be a veteran. You have to know the shortest route from start of the level to the end of the level. You have to know how to approach every boss and every enemy. You have to have a perfect build and whatnot. In other words, it is very hard to rush through Nioh. So if you really think that you can just speed through the story and hit the endgame without learning how to actually play the game, forget about it. My advice is to just accept that the items you get right now are trash tier in general scheme of things and just enjoy the game. Master the combat, learn how to use new weapons and just chill. Don't let the fact that there is some better equipment out there later on in the game ruin the experience for you right now. Let it come to you naturally. The game is called Nioh and not the Farm the Best Chess Piece 2017 for a good reason. Tip number 3. Don't approach Nioh PvE as you would normally prefer to approach Dark Souls PvE. There are plenty of players out there that are trying to transition from Dark Souls to Nioh, and they're mostly using Dark Souls-like playstyle to progress through the game. However, unlike Dark Souls, and I mean pretty much every Souls game, Nioh has a lot more depth to it, so approaching the combat in Nioh as you would normally approach the combat in Dark Souls is a terrible idea. Nioh allows you to strategize whatever you want, and it is very natural to do so. The developer is encouraging you to spend some time studying the environment and enemies so you can adjust your setup and pick the right strategy. So doing something that what you'd normally do in Dark Souls, like pressing R1 and then rolling over and over, will likely make your Nioh PvE experience a lot harder than it actually needs to be. Instead, you can look for unorthodox solutions, like using specific guardian spirits to counter a boss, or packing a bow for some nasty headshots in order to prevent the boss from buffing. While some of these things are also present in some of the Dark Souls titles, it is a lot more prominent in Nioh, and it is a lot more beneficial to think outside of the box and adjust your setup, as opposed to relying on simple hidden run strategy to carry you through the game. In other words, if the game seems too hard and unbeatable, it is likely the problem with how you approach it. Don't be afraid to adjust your setup and think outside of the box, because the game has a lot more to offer than simple hit and run action. Tip number 4. Utility stats are super useful. A lot of RPG players, for some unknown reason, hell, even experienced ones, seem to think that support stats are useless. Well, it's not the case when it comes to Nioh. Stats like Magic and Spirit are actually super useful. Spirit, for example, allows you to unlock extra Guardian Spirit bonuses, and with a very little investment you can get a pretty hefty bonus, which is super useful early on. For example, with Kato, one of the 3 starting Guardian Spirits, by simply powering your Spirit stat up to 10, you get extra 15% skill damage, which is is a solid boost to your overall DPS, especially early on. Magic is another great stat that will not only make your life easier, but will also make your combat a lot more interesting. All thanks to various buffs and debuffs, you can adjust your setup according to the area or the boss that you face, spicing up your combat nicely. It's not a secret that talismans like Sloth and Weakness are game-changing when it comes to PvE in Nioh, but it's obviously up to you if you want to use all that fancy stuff or not. My point here is that utility stats in Nioh are very useful, so if you're not gonna level them, make sure it's because you don't actually need it or like it, and not because you think that it is useless. So let's sum everything up. Don't hesitate to swap the gear, even if it's not as rare as your current one. As long as it is of higher level, chances are it will be more useful. Don't try to rush through the game and search for the best gear. Instead, focus on learning the game and progress naturally. Don't be afraid to strategize, because in Nioh, hit and run is one of the least efficient strategies. And well, if you need an extra help, don't hesitate to invest some points into spirit or magic, because not only it will help you to progress through the game, it will also make it more fun. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.